They called them missile cities. Not depots, not silos. Cities. Because that's what they are. Entire underground networks carved deep into granite mountains, connected by automated rail lines running through tunnels wide enough to drive a loaded missile launcher through. Stocked with row after row of ballistic missiles and drones, sealed behind hundreds of feet of solid rock. Iran spent 4 decades building these facilities around a single military calculation. The United States owns the sky, and the only weapons safe from that ownership are the ones buried somewhere the sky cannot reach. For 40 years, the mountain made that guarantee. No American bomb had ever been proven capable of reaching this deep. No aircraft had ever been asked to deliver one this far. Then, in June 2025, the United States Air Force flew 7 B-2 stealth bombers across the planet on the longest strike mission in a generation, each one carrying something that had never once been used in the history of modern warfare. Before we get to what that something was, and what happened when it hit, hold on to one number: 26. I'll explain it in a few minutes, and when I do, the rest of this video lands very differently. First, you need to understand what was actually inside that mountain, because the answer changes what the word success even means in this war. A CNN investigation mapped at least 27 of these underground missile complexes, identifying more than 107 separate tunnel exits from satellite imagery alone. Total estimates from Western intelligence put the number of distinct missile cities at around 30, scattered across Iran, concentrated in the mountainous interior and near the Gulf coastline. What's inside one of these complexes is not what most people imagine when they hear the word bunker. There is an automated rail system running through the tunnels, like a subway, but carrying missiles. There are assembly halls, fuel depots, storage chambers, and concealed launch exits cut directly into the mountainside. The tunnels connect through blast-resistant doors that limit damage if one section is hit. Many exits are camouflaged inside natural rock formations that look identical to the surrounding terrain from above. Iran showed some of this to the world. Long rows of missiles lined up in cavern-like tunnels, launcher trucks moving through underground corridors. Footage from 2020 showed missiles stored vertically on an automated railway system, ready to fire in rapid succession without cranes or equipment. The whole system was built around one operational requirement: get a launcher to the surface, fire, and get it back underground before anyone can respond. If you've heard of Vietnam's Cu Chi tunnels, the vast underground network that allowed Vietnamese forces to survive years of American air power in the 1960s, drop a comment. Because what Iran built is the same doctrine 40 years later, at 20 times the scale. The principle is identical. Put your most important assets somewhere that air dominance cannot reach. Survive long enough for the political calculation to shift. Keep fighting from underground. Now here's the detail that changes everything. These facilities are not all the same depth. Analysts break them into 3 tiers. Tier 3. The shallow facilities, around 100 feet underground, are vulnerable and have taken real damage. Tier 2, sitting roughly 200 to 260 feet down and reinforced with high-strength concrete, can survive most air-launched weapons, but can be partially damaged by repeated strikes on the same point. Then there are the Tier 1 facilities, the ones Iran most cares about protecting. These go between 400 and 1,500 feet into solid granite bedrock, not soil, not concrete, granite, one of the hardest materials on Earth. The specific type found in the Shirkuh mountain range in central Iran, where some of the most critical facilities are located, can withstand pressure levels that make standard military construction materials look fragile by comparison. It absorbs and disperses explosive energy rather than transmitting it. You can bomb the surface of Shirkuh granite all week. What's inside stays intact. Now, what was the weapon those 7 B-2s were carrying? It's called the GBU-57 Massive Ordnance Penetrator. The name is literal. It penetrates. It weighs 30,000 pounds, heavier than a fully loaded school bus, over 20 feet long. It's precision-guided by GPS, built with a casing made from a specialized high-density steel alloy, specifically engineered to survive the impact of hitting solid earth at high speed without breaking apart. and then detonate after it has driven itself to a programmed depth. It is the most powerful conventional bomb the United States makes, and the only aircraft in the world that can carry it is the B-2 Spirit stealth bomber. The 7 bombers that flew to Iran in June 2025 took off from Whiteman Air Force Base in Missouri. They flew across the Atlantic, refueled over the ocean from aerial tankers, crossed into Iranian airspace without being detected, released their bombs over Fordo and Natanz, Iran's most hardened nuclear facilities, and flew home. The round trip took approximately 30 hours. It was the first time in over 2 decades that B-2s had been used on a mission of this range, and the first time in the entire history of modern warfare that the GBU-57 had been dropped in actual combat. Against its designed target, standard soil, sandstone, ordinary reinforced concrete, the GBU-57 can penetrate roughly 200 feet before detonating. Against high-strength concrete, around 60 feet. Against solid granite, it can penetrate roughly 26 feet. Iran's deepest missile cities are buried up to 1,500 feet into granite. There is a gap of more than 1,400 feet between the bottom of what the GBU-57 can reach and the ceiling of what Iran buried. Engineers and geologists call this the dead zone. The explosive energy from the bomb dissipates as it travels through the rock. By the time the shock wave reaches the depth where Tier 1 facilities sit, it has been absorbed. The mountain takes the hit. Nothing inside changes. A researcher at the UK-based RUSI Institute put it directly. The mountain does not care how many sorties are flown above it. That doesn't mean the strikes didn't matter. The June 2025 operation caused significant structural damage to Fordow and Natanz. But those were nuclear facilities, not the missile cities. When Operation Epic Fury began in February 2026, the U.S. turned toward the missile infrastructure, and it made a strategic choice that most coverage hasn't fully explained. The goal was not to destroy what was inside the missile cities. Pentagon planners had acknowledged, in both classified and public analysis over 15 years, that the deepest chambers were beyond the reach of conventional weapons. So the campaign set a different objective: seal the doors. If the launchers couldn't get out, they couldn't fire. Strikes focused on tunnel entrances, access roads, ventilation shafts, and the surface equipment Iran needed to keep those openings operational, not the underground chambers where the missiles sat. It was an honest admission of a physical limit, translated into a workable military strategy. CNN's satellite investigation found that 77% of the visible tunnel entrances across Iran's missile cities were struck in the first 3 weeks of the conflict. That sounds significant. On the surface, literally, it was. Bomb craters at entrances, collapsed tunnel mouths, structural damage visible from orbit. Within 1 to 2 days of each strike, construction equipment appeared at the sites. Debris was cleared. Access routes were reopened. Operations resumed. CNN reported that U.S. and Israeli forces recognized this pattern and began targeting not just tunnel entrances, but the bulldozers and excavators Iran deployed to reopen them. Iran kept digging anyway, construction equipment clearing rubble while strikes continued above. The diggers were targeted. The digging continued. The mountain had more workers than the campaign had patience. The missile complex near Isfahan, embedded in Sofe Mountain, one of the most strategically significant sites in Iran's underground network, was bombed approximately 20 times during the conflict. It is by most assessments the most heavily targeted single military facility in the entire war. A resident of Isfahan described the pattern to journalists. The mountain is bombed, smoke rises, and then in the morning missiles are launching from the same location. 20 strikes, back online within 12 hours of each one. The facilities don't need their entrances to survive. They have multiple exits. Some are decoys, cut into the rock to draw strikes away from functional openings. Some are concealed inside natural formations that are invisible from satellite imagery until a truck emerges. The launch trucks drive out through whichever opening is available, travel to the launch point, fire, and drive back underground before any counterstrike can be organized. The actual production lines, the stockpiles, the storage, all of it is deeper than any current conventional bomb can reach. The satellite data from after the ceasefire makes it concrete. CNN's analysis of Airbus defense and space imagery found that within 7 weeks of the ceasefire, Iran had reopened 50 of the 69 tunnel entrances struck at 18 underground facilities. Access roads bombed to block launcher movement had been repaired, at 2 sites fully repaved. The missiles that were inside the mountains when the entrances were sealed were still inside when the bulldozers finished. What this creates is a specific and difficult military problem. If you cannot destroy what is inside, you have to manage what comes out. Estimates of the remaining GBU-57 stockpile after Midnight Hammer, somewhere between 6 and 15 bombs. The total U.S. Air Force inventory was never large. At an estimated cost of $370 million per weapon, it was never produced in significant volume. After 14 were expended in one operation against nuclear facilities, the supply dropped to a level that makes sustained use against the broader missile city network extremely difficult. A new production contract was awarded to Boeing, worth over $60 million, to build replacement weapons. Delivery is scheduled to begin in 2028. The war is happening now. Here is the structural problem underneath that timeline. Boeing owns the intellectual property for the bomb's guidance system. The Air Force cannot simply commission another manufacturer to accelerate production. It has to work with Boeing, under Boeing's pace, on components only Boeing controls. Defense analysts call this vendor lock. The U.S. has exactly one weapon that can threaten Iran's deepest facilities. That weapon can only be delivered by one aircraft. That aircraft exists in a fleet of 19. The weapon is made by one contractor, and there are somewhere between 6 and 15 of them left. The U.S. Air Force has ordered production tripled. The B-21 Raider, the B-2's replacement currently entering service, is being designed to carry a smaller successor to the GBU-57. Smaller means more can be built. Whether that successor can reach depths the current weapon cannot is an open engineering question with no public answer yet. The GBU-57 was not the only penetrating weapon the U.S. brought to this conflict. During Operation Epic Fury, a second bunker-busting weapon made its combat debut, the GBU-72, a 5,000-pound advanced penetrator designed to break through reinforced concrete and rock. General Dan Kane confirmed publicly that the U.S. dropped GBU-72s into underground coastal missile storage sites near the Strait of Hormuz, the first time in history the weapon had been used in actual combat. 2 separate bomb systems, both making their combat debuts in the same war, against the same class of target. So if the bombers can't destroy what's inside, what does the U.S. actually do? Every missile Iran launches from its underground cities has to emerge from the mountain, travel through open air, and reach its target. The instant it clears the tunnel, the instant it is above ground, it becomes vulnerable. Not to the bombers, which are long gone, to the missile defense systems positioned across the Gulf. The SM-3, launched from Navy destroyers, intercepts ballistic missiles during their ascent phase, before they begin their descent. The SM-6 catches what the SM-3 misses in the terminal phase, during the final seconds of descent. The Patriot system on the ground is the last line. 3 defensive layers, all targeting the same problem. Stop the missile between the mountain and the target. On June 5th and 6th of this year, Iran launched 7 ballistic missiles at U.S. bases in Kuwait and Bahrain, all of them originating from underground facilities like the ones described in this video. 6 were intercepted. The 7th failed before reaching anything. That result is the Navy's answer to what the bombers cannot prevent. But the underlying logic of the situation is worth sitting with. Iran's Tier 1 facilities are functionally immune to conventional bombing. The U.S. response is to intercept everything that emerges from them. That approach works, when it works perfectly. It is expensive. It draws down interceptor stockpiles that are already under pressure from 100 days of continuous operations, and it requires a perfect record every time. Iran only needs one missile to reach its target. The defense system needs to stop all of them. Step back now and think about who else is watching all of this. China has been studying every B-2 sortie, every bomb crater photograph, every satellite image of tunnel entrances reopened within 48 hours. China is assessed to have the world's most extensive underground military infrastructure. tunnels sheltering nuclear warheads, command networks, submarine bases, and leadership facilities buried to depths that dwarf anything in Iran. Chinese analysts call it the underground Great Wall. Some of Beijing's most sensitive command facilities are estimated to be buried 700 meters underground, more than double the deepest point Iran's missile cities are believed to reach. After the GBU-57 strikes on Iran, reporting from the South China Morning Post and Asia Times noted that Chinese defense planners were accelerating programs to bury strategic assets even deeper. A proposal from the Chinese Academy of Sciences called for moving critical infrastructure into underground corridors across western China, a direct response to what the Iran strikes demonstrated about the vulnerability of surface installations. The lesson China drew was not that the U.S. can destroy underground facilities. It was more specific. The U.S. can destroy facilities that aren't deep enough. Build past the dead zone, and the bomb cannot follow you. The Asia Times framed it in a March 2026 headline. U.S. bunker buster hits on Iran drive China deeper underground. Iran's missile cities are a live-fire demonstration of what a sufficient depth advantage looks like in practice. Beijing is adjusting its programs accordingly. The U.S. knows this. It is why the B-21 program and its successor munition exist. The problem Iran demonstrated is now the benchmark that every U.S. adversary is engineering to, and that every U.S. weapons program is racing to answer. China watched 14 GBU-57s hit Iranian mountains and did not conclude that underground infrastructure was defeated. It concluded that it needed to build deeper than Iran did. The Iran war has not just tested American weapons. It has told every U.S. adversary exactly how deep they need to go. Here is the clearest way to state what this war has revealed. Iran solved the air superiority problem by going underground. The United States controls the sky above Iran completely. No Iranian aircraft is a meaningful threat to U.S. bombers. But that control stops at the ground. Below the surface, the physics of rock and depth have created a protected space that the most powerful conventional weapons in the U.S. arsenal can currently only partially reach. The Navy's interceptors handle what comes out of that protected space. They are working, 6 for 6 in the most recent exchange, with sustained intercept operations across the broader conflict. But interceptors do not eliminate the source. They manage the output of a production and storage system that, at its deepest level, remains intact. The 30 missile cities are still there. The automated tunnels are still running. The Tier 1 facilities in Shirkuh granite at 1,500 feet have not been reached by anything the U.S. has dropped. The GBU-57 stockpile is nearly gone. Replacements arrive in 2028. The mountain does not care. Does the U.S. eventually cross the dead zone with a new weapon, a new bomber, a new approach, and actually destroy what's inside those mountains? Or does the future of this conflict, and every conflict that follows, come down to managing what comes out of the mountain rather than reaching what is buried inside it?